Aleisha. Aleisha's been working with open source since she was 15, and she's amazing, but you'll know that at the end of her talk. So Aleisha, wow us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I te tuatahi ngā mihi ki ngā tāngata whenua o te rohe nei, nā rātou te mana, nā rātou te whenua, nā rātou te ngā tino rangatiratanga mō ake tonu. I te tuarua, ko Ruapehu te maunga, ko Aotea te waka, ko Wanganui te awa, ko Te Ati Haunui a Pāparangi te iwi, ko Ngāti Haua, Raua, ko Ngāti Maru, ngā hapu, no Taumaranui, me Cambodia, me India o, kei te noho o ki te Wanganui ātara, ko Aleisha Amohia tōku ingoa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So kia ora, hello everybody. My name is Aleisha Amohia. Thank you so much for coming to my presentation today. I opened by firstly introducing myself with a pepeha, which tells you a little bit about where I come from in Te Reo Māori. I also acknowledged the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, whose lands we're gathering on for this conference and who, like Māori, never ceded sovereignty. Today I'm going to be presenting about how Koha is much more than a library system and always has been. But first, a little bit more about me so you know who you're listening to. I was born in Wellington in Aotearoa, New Zealand, to a Māori Indian father and a Cambodian mother. I'm the firstborn of 4 children, and I've always loved technology, having been introduced to it basically fresh out the womb. I'm a technical lead and software developer at Catalyst IT, and I've been working on the Koha open source library system at Catalyst for over 10 years now. My first patch was in early 2014 when I was a student in the Catalyst Open Source Academy. And before I was full-time at Catalyst, I also studied at Victoria University of Wellington. I graduated in 2020 with a degree in computer science and a degree in business. Outside of Catalyst, I do a lot of work around Māori rights and gender equality, in particular in the tech sector. So for those who don't know, Catalyst is a software company that specializes in open source software. So that means we provide solutions and support for and with open source software. So this ranges from teams using open source software for bespoke development to teams focused on the hosting and support of one open source product or ecosystem of products like my team. Catalyst was founded in 1997 and now has around 300 employees spread across Aotearoa, Australia, Canada, the UK and Europe. Catalyst also provides the only New Zealand-owned and operated cloud computing service built on open source technology, and we even host the New Zealand Open Source Awards, recognising and celebrating the outstanding work done with free and open source software in artistic and scientific and social ways, and all of the outcomes that delivers for New Zealand. So this is a photo from one of our previous open source academies, through which we've guided nearly 100 young students to making their first open source software contributions. I'm incredibly proud of Koha and Catalyst being such a large part of my journey as a software developer. I connect really strongly to Catalyst's mission of using and promoting open source software, and I present a lot of conferences about that. At Catalyst, my team is called Ropu Kohinga, Māori words again, and we chose it to represent the wider ecosystem of open source library technology that we support. We've been maintaining and providing Koha for a really long time, and we also look after Viewfind and DSpace now too. Our team is just one of many at Catalyst, and we belong to a unit called the Open Knowledge Group, which also provides open source e-learning platforms such as Moodle and Tōtara. So Koha. Koha has always been intended to be more than a library system that gets simply purchased and used. Koha is a Māori word. It's most commonly translated as gift, but it has a deeper meaning. The software was given the name Koha to represent that the system was made open source as a gift to the community from Horowhenua Library Trust. In the Māori worldview, a koha is a gift that comes with or fulfills an obligation. It implies that there's an ongoing relationship between the gift giver and the gift receiver, and that this will be an exchange at various stages during the relationship. So it describes the open source nature of the system and the Koha community. In Justin's keynote yesterday, he talked about the problem with prioritizing the artifact over the ecosystem and ending up with users who just want the free value you've provided. So one way we've tried to mitigate that with Koha is by putting it in the name and allowing that to foster a culture where people understand how platforms like this actually come to be and the role that they can take, how they can participate. So this is a whakatoki, or a Māori proverb, kia whakatōmuri te haere whakamua. I walk backwards into the future with my eyes fixed on the past. Before I describe how Koha can be applied in more ways than the average library system and how powerful that can be within your organization, let's go back to the start, to the Koha origin story. So Koha was developed for Horowhenua Library Trust by Katipo Communications in 1999 because the world didn't have an open source library system and they wanted one. And they also needed a system without the Y2K bug. So Horowhenua Libraries went live with Koha in 2000 on the 3rd of January, and Koha 1.0 was released for public download in July of that same year. It was the world's first fully web-based open source integrated library system. Koha has two sites, a back-end for staff and admin users, and a front-end interface for the public. So this screenshot was the early back-end, very 2000s. A few months later, the first code change was accepted from outside of Katipo Communications. Within the year, Koha had a new script to automate translations. The following year, in 2002, the first bug was lodged and fixed in Bugzilla, our bug tracking platform. That same year, Koha 1.3 was released, which included support for multiple mark flavors. And these are important stories because it demonstrates how Koha was designed from the get-go to be as versatile as possible and to respond to the needs of a global community of users. Koha in 2025 is a fully featured library management platform. It has modules for managing acquisitions, serials, electronic resources, authorities, preservation, and the circulation of many kinds of items. It provides options for flexible reporting, label printing, multi-format notices, offline circulation, you name it, it can do it. Koha is highly customizable and configurable. Libraries can create frameworks to fit their unique data, change how their interface looks and behaves, install any number of translations, and show or hide functionality by setting permissions by user. It's integratable and interoperable with other systems. Koha is now used in 18,000 plus organizations and library consortia of all sizes around the world. And we actually don't know how, that's an old statistic. I might be wrong, it might be way more. These are just the ones that reported to us last year when I got this statistic. The project is over 9,000 days old. It has over 55,000 commits. Over 520 people have contributed patches to Koha. I mean, with that kind of scale and diversity, the project was bound to evolve and grow, more than the team in 1999 could have imagined when they were first writing it. Many of you will know Chris Cormack, one of the original Koha developers. He's still with us at Catalyst. He's now our Kaihoa Waire Matahiko, and his role is about making sure that Catalyst is a great place for Māori to work in and for Māori to work with. So when Katipo Communications were tasked with building the world's first open source library system, Chris remembers that he said, what was it called? The cursed question, or maybe it was a blessed question. It's just a big database, how hard could it be? Of course, an ambitious statement, not totally misguided though. The Koha catalog is a very complex but big database, which means it can be used to store information about almost anything. And the thing about Koha is that while it was intended as a library system, in practice the applications are endless. One of the very first installations of Koha after it was released was for cataloguing car manuals for a manufacturer in the United States. In our Catalyst demo site for Koha, among other things, we catalog Pokemon just because we can. And in the last year, we've started working with an Indigenous film festival based in Aotearoa. They use Koha to catalogue their films and its contributors. We've also implemented Koha for organisations that don't use it as a library system at all. Instead, it's used primarily for cataloguing. So maybe it really is just a big database. We get to work with some really awesome libraries and organisations, and I wanted to take you through some of the ways that they're using Koha that are kind of non-standard and creative. So FKA Children's Services and Kolavai Libraries show how Koha can be just a big database with customizable item types and collections. They have some very cool and potentially unexpected items in their catalogues. FKA Children's Services provides resources to early education and care services in Victoria. Their collection includes bilingual books in over 70 languages, multicultural dramatic play items such as cookware, musical instruments, puppets, and dolls. And in recent years, they introduced a variety of literacy kits, story bags, and audio story bags. Kolavai Library in Tonga started by filling a need for books in the community after Cyclone Gita. However, they've since received donations in the forms of laptops, bikes, and paint, all of which can be checked out through the library. Over the years, there have been plugins and workarounds for making items bookable within Koha, but because there was so much demand for it, it's now become built-in functionality. So that means that Koha can replace systems that are solely for the pre-booking of things like testing devices or study rooms, meeting rooms, or laptops. And it's just another way that the library system can become useful beyond the library's collections. A key feature of a library system is the ability to circulate items to your users, so checking them in and out, transferring them between locations, reserving them or placing holds. These functions could be applied to standard stock or inventory management. Many organisations need a system that can track the movement of an item, allocate it to someone, log its previous location, and importantly, report on those movements. So that sounds a lot like library circulation to me. And this isn't a new idea, but RFID tags could also be used to elevate that whole experience and make the scanning and tracking process more efficient. Now, one of my favorite things about Koha is how configurable the public interface is. Libraries have the option to completely change how the library website looks and build some very creative catalogues. They can do this through simple styles like colours and fonts and logos. They can show and hide elements and animate the page using JavaScript. They can set system preferences to turn features on and off, like the language toggle. They can add custom content in all of their installed languages, anywhere on the public interface homepage. And they can use the new content management system built-in Pages tool to create custom pages. So essentially, you can make the public interface look completely different from another Koha public interface, or really nothing like a typical library catalogue. This is such an incredibly powerful built-in feature to have in any platform. I think it's one of the key things that sets an open source system apart from a proprietary system as well, because it can be so hard in the latter to configure something in a sustainable way that doesn't cost thousands of dollars in upkeep with every major upgrade. And in Koha, it's just there. It's rude not to use it. One of the libraries that we look after is the Chartered Accountants of Australia and New Zealand, or CANS. And they're one of my favourite examples of how a Koha public interface could look using the tools available in their backend interface. Because with this view, there's no code customizations in their package to create this layout. There's a bunch of configuration, but it all lives in the database. It basically survives through upgrades. And it's not only possible, but it's also easy for their library staff to make edits to this themselves, which they do. Another way that some of our libraries have been creative with their catalogue websites is by showing completely different styles for libraries which use the same back end. So here are the public interfaces for South Taranaki District Council and Stratford District Council. So we've got different organisations using the same Koha back end. And then we just use an Apache rule to determine which style sheet to use based on which URL their user accessed Koha through. You'll see in the main section where it says new items and mahi toi, this content is custom to their backend, to their instance. The libraries have set this up themselves, and they've chosen for it to be the same, to be shared, because they share the catalogue. However, if they didn't want to do this, we could quite easily set some JavaScript rules or something to show the intended content for that site. And we've done versions of this for a few of our libraries. We've got a school library based in Sydney that shows different public interfaces for their different schools, different grades. We also have a public library in New Zealand which recently took on the library management for a local school. So they've got one branch which gets treated as the school library and sees a different catalogue website because we don't want school items visible at the other public library branches. And as I mentioned, Koha has a basic content management system tool which lets librarians make custom pages. And CANS uses this really well to provide specialised landing pages for the resources their users might look for. For them, it's about making their lists and collections easier to find, anticipating the needs of their users. So their Koha public interface has become more of a knowledge hub, where all kinds of resources living in different digital repositories have been brought to one central website. Speaking of a centralised search for multiple databases, Auckland University of Technology uses Viewfind to search their library catalogue. So Viewfind is an open source discovery layer which allows a user to search a range of sources in a combined search. Viewfind can harvest and display data from Koha using basic REST APIs. And through this integration, AUT have also sponsored a bunch of improvements to both Koha and Viewfind to make them even more interoperable and make anyone else using this combination of software benefit from their sponsorship. AUT recently undertook a project with us to make their special collections or archives collection searchable and available. It was important for them that these items didn't show up in the Viewfind combined search because they had a different process for loaning them out or making them available. So they toyed with the idea of having a separate Koha instance for their special collections, but with some support from us at Catalyst, they were able to adapt their Koha public interface, which wasn't being used because they were using Viewfind instead, to be a site just for searching special collections. And the content that you can see in the screenshot was all added by them. So this is an adaptation of a built-in Koha feature that we've seen. It was a feature designed for users to submit potential problems with the catalogue to the library. And we've seen it be used unofficially as a request tracker. For Koha libraries in the room, that's the catalogue concerns feature. So users could submit a request and library staff have a nice module in the staff interface to assign the requests, update the users on progress, or resolve them. And it's just another example of something that wasn't quite designed for it, but it can be a nice way to adapt it and use it differently. So I'm nearly at the end now, but I want to talk about what makes Koha special beyond the code. Koha empowers Indigenous communities and stories in many ways. Koha by default supports diacritics, which means Indigenous stories don't have their meaning lost when characters with accents get replaced with question marks. Also, Koha has offline circulation, so libraries in the islands and in remote destinations with patchy internet can rest assured that their library can stay open if something happens. And it's web-based, so they don't need special computers or apps to run Koha. Plus, I've already mentioned the translation capability, but just to really bring that message home, last September I was in Montreal for KohaCon, our annual Koha conference, and it was our first fully bilingual conference. So presenters spoke in English or in French, and the audience had headsets where we were receiving live translations. And all of us presenters agreed that there's just this unmatched power in being able to give and receive information in your language. So it's pretty amazing that Koha was able to work with translated content from almost the very beginning. And it's worth mentioning the economical impact of Koha. Organisations have been created to support the development and hosting of the Koha library system. People have been paid for contributing to Koha, for providing Koha. Through Koha, people have been able to build capability and upskill. I learned how to do my job through and around supporting Koha. At Catalyst, we've guided young people to making their first open source contributions at the Open Source Academy using Koha. I was one of those students. This is a picture of me running a Koha bug squashing session at Catalyst a few years ago, where we invite non-technical people to make their first open source code contributions. And moments like that are very full circle for me. I feel like there are very few projects where someone could learn to make a code contribution in just one morning. And the global Koha community makes that possible. And then, of course, on the user end, Koha is used to teach people librarianship all around the world. No one really dreams of becoming rich through open source software or through libraries. So this isn't that story, but I think it's very cool that Koha has literally enabled people to work and travel and support their families and support their communities. And it was created just down the road from me in New Zealand, so that feels special. And I do need to mention specifically how the open source software nature of Koha is such a large part of its growth and success. It's pretty incredible, the proximity that we have to the code base, the freedom we have to innovate and collaborate, contribute, configure, customize, govern, prioritize, even release is so unique. As a developer, working so closely with end users like library staff has taught me more about communication and understanding requirements than anything else I've experienced. It's taught me how to think broadly, how to design for diversity, and how to develop sustainably. And actually, the collective voice of the Koha community is my number one favorite thing about our platform. Our people are what makes the project strong. Every time I get to be around the library community in general, I'm reminded of how thoughtful and caring everyone is. And that's something I'm actively seeking out because we work in the tech sector and the values here can sometimes be a little bit different. I wanted to make this point by talking about Rosalie Blake. This is a photo of 3 members of the original Koha project team presenting at KohaCon 2020 in Wellington. So we've got Rachel Hamilton-Williams at the podium, Chris Cormack, and Rosalie Blake. Rosalie was the head of libraries for Horowhenua Trust in 1999 when the trust realised that it needed a new library system. Investigations found that systems that were too expensive or not suitable for the technology available at the libraries. And it was Rosalie who bravely decided that they would commission Katipo Communications to write a new system for them. And then it was her that convinced the trust, when the system was finished, that they should give it away as free and open source software. So without her, Koha would truly not exist. And when she passed away, it was decided to name the next release Koha 2211 Rosalie in her honour. The Koha project tends to attract innovative, enthusiastic, kind people like Rosalie. And I don't know if that's because it's open source or because it's a library system, or because it was born in New Zealand and instilled with all of these values based in community all those years ago, or if it's because it continues to be maintained by a global team and not owned or controlled by any one support company, or a combination of all of those things. But when an organisation chooses Koha, they also choose its history, its legacy, its potential, and its people. And there's really nothing else like that. And that's what I came to share with you today, so thank you. I have bookmarks for people who still read paper books. They're quite nice. And they've got the meaning behind Koha on one side and how you contribute to the Koha community on the other side. So please feel free to take some for you and your friends and family. And I think I've got lots of time for questions if anyone has any.
You sort of had your final bit just on your bookmark was sort of talking about collaboration and looking at that map. Obviously, you span time zones and language groups. And I just wondered, from your perspective as being a New Zealand-based open source company, what do you reckon, well, are there any tips around that worldwide collaboration? Do you think it is a worldwide collaboration, or does it go into groups, and what else could we learn?
Yeah, great question. Well, there are many support companies providing Koha around the world, and we hear a lot from the ones based in the US and in Europe. They contribute a lot too, which we benefit from. Something that's been really important for us in New Zealand is just making sure we stay vocal and stay involved in the community, and sometimes that's offering one of our people as a release maintainer for the old stable version of Koha, and you're maybe backporting like 1 or 2 security patches a month, but it means that we're staying on top of the things that are coming into Koha and connecting with the other vendors. And there's so many other ways to engage in the community. There's chat rooms, mailing lists. I think it's important for us to just stay on the pulse of it somehow, going to the developer meetings and being involved in the releases. But one other way that we try to stay involved is encouraging our libraries to join those community chats and asking for things that they're interested in. And that's probably the other main way that we contribute back, is through sponsorship and development. So there's definitely more those communities that we hear more from because there's more of them. But I think we also have a bit of the upper hand, being the birthplace of Koha and having someone like Chris Cormack still very involved. We're given a chance to have our say a lot of the time, which is nice. But yeah, I think it's just finding small ways to stay on the pulse of it, whether it's taking up a role in the release team or just answering a question on the mailing list every now and then.
I noticed that it's written in Perl, so props for that. Given that you want to keep attracting new community members, do you think that's a problem to get to have what is now effectively a legacy language?
I love Perl. I think it's great. Maybe it's harder to find people because Perl's not taught anywhere. But we make a point of onboarding new developers. Koha's got a really great development environment that people can quite easily install with Docker. And there's coding guidelines and all kinds of documentation and some really dedicated people willing to coach and give their time. So maybe it's a barrier. Because we're still alive and still thriving, I choose to believe it's not.
Thank you, Aleisha. Great talk. I just can't get enough of the Koha story. Bit of the dark side though, as an open source project, and probably there are a few of us here who live in open source projects, what have you found most challenging about the fact that it's an open source project?
Something that's really challenging is having an open source conversation with someone who doesn't know open source. There's these kind of key reservations about what open source is. People think it's really insecure, but the Koha project has been around for 25 years, and we've got really robust QA processes and, for example, one thing is that if an organization has committed a patch or a patch set, they can't be the same people to sign it off or QA it. So that helps with making sure that the quality is there, but also to make sure that one vendor doesn't overwhelm the project with how they see it evolving. So having that conversation can be really hard, making sure that people understand that it'll be different project by project, but established projects like Koha have these processes in place, and I'd rather they asked the question and gave us a chance to explain that than assuming because it's open and anyone can contribute to it that there's no QA process involved. And then I guess on the other side of it, when people hear free and open source, they think it's free, and sure, go ahead and download Koha and run it for yourself if you'd like to. You do need some technical expertise to be able to do that. So when you're paying a support company like Catalyst, you're paying for their expertise, for the years of training that they've done to be able to provide that for you so that you can hands off and just trust your system. So sometimes that's a difficult conversation, but I think that's, this has come up a lot in the conference already. How do we tell the open source story and have a sustainable business model? It's something that's going to change as new tech problems come out and all of these things. But I think as long as we keep relating it to people, and well, that's what we do. We keep relating it to people. We remind people of the values around open source, and in particular around our Koha project, and that really speaks to people. So I think it's letting them know that they don't have to understand technology, and they don't have to be able to explain it, but we can, and so that's when we come in. Yeah.
Nice, thank you. Okay, I've got a cheeky follow-up question. I think Catalyst is in a unique position to be across so many of these great web-based open source projects, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I recently had a conversation with one of our former colleagues, Matt Porritt, who's now at Moodle, and he's looking at how different open source projects do contribution. So I wondered if, because Moodle is also in your group, how much cross-pollination you have with those other open source systems.
Well, Catalyst is actually great for that lateral movement. If people want to contribute to other projects, they totally can. It's just a question of asking, really. But at least in our team, we've had the privilege of being able to work on many open source systems, Koha, DSpace, Viewfind, WordPress, and basically whatever our libraries are using, they ask us questions and we want to be able to answer them. So there's a lot of different ways to get involved, and I know that Catalyst facilitates that kind of cross-pollination if people want to.
Just formulating the question in my head. Question for a friend is, what database backend are you using?
Koha can run with MySQL or MariaDB.
Okay, and I have no problem thinking of Perl as a mature and robust language, so you stick to your Perl guns, please.
Well, we're 25 years deep, so there's
mature.
no backing out now, but I really do enjoy Perl. And the thing about programming languages, right, is that once you understand how it's structured and the semantics behind it, you can translate that to so many languages. So Perl is just one, and I think it's great. And it hasn't stopped me from using other languages with the other projects we support. I think there was a BOF at the afternoon tea session about GLAM, and I missed it. But if you were there, can you please find me at the Penguin Dinner, because I'd love to talk about GLAM with you. Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much, everybody. Take a bookmark.
Thank you, Aleisha, and a little Koha from Everything Open.
Cool.
So, thank you. Very good.